Oh no. What?
It's that Dark Trooper music.
Oh, that's right.
Dun 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 dun.
Da, 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 da.
Disarm.
Oh, he's got the horns on the helmet. That's interesting.
It's Darth Maul.
Oh my God, could you imagine? Okay.
Giancarlo Esposito.
Thank you for gathering the Mandalorians into one place.
What? Okay.
I will create an army that will bring order to the galaxy.
Wow. Okay, his plan explained. Welcome back to New Rockstars. The Mandalorian Chapter 23 reveals a shadow council of Imperial warlords setting up the First Order with things like Project Necromancer, awaiting the return of Thrawn. Oh no, and this leads to our dear friend Paz Vizsla dying at the hands of some Praetorian guards, The Last Jedi. But is the silent partner the real spy of this episode, the Armorer?
Say it
If
ain't
so, we have questions. We would have questions if so, but dank Ferrick, this episode, Hector.
Dank Ferrick indeed, Erik. I can't believe you're bringing this up because that would make me so sad if it was the Armorer. I love her. I love her very much.
We did suspect something that was up with the Armorer earlier this season, but it wasn't this. It was something else. Anyway, welcome back to The Break Room Presents Wookieeleaks, our weekly Mandalorian after show. I'm Erik Voss. Tommy Bechtold's out this week, but I'm here with Hector Navarro.
Hey, everybody. So happy to be here. I'm going to try to do my best to fill in that Tommy energy.
And like, so Hector, just like opening look at this episode, what are your thoughts coming out of this?
Very dense, very dense. This is the one that was like, okay, y'all don't like having fun with Jack Black and Lizzo? Fine, here's the lore. Here's all of the setup for the next couple of years of Star Wars storytelling.
Yeah, I know from the beginning of this series that they were going to say this is going to show us the rise of the First Order. So they're delivering on those promises. I have no problem all that being set up. And I love the idea that they're bringing in like Thrawn minions in this conspiracy. I'm dying to know who the spies of this episode were, because you know it's called The Spies, and on the surface everyone is kind of just like being exactly who they say they were. No one's being duplicitous, but it also seems like the Mandalorians got set up on this planet a little bit. So I'm trying to reconcile my feelings between those two things. If there were spies who set them up, there's just a lot of like logic gaps on how they did that, or why they would want to do that, or how that fits in with other things that they've done in the past.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk through this episode with you, Hector.
So what the fet happened in this episode? Things really start cooking here in episode 7, The Spies. Elia Kane meets up with a hologram of Moff Gideon in a back alley of Coruscant to discuss the status of their plan. She reveals to him that things aren't going great on Navarro, best planet in the Star Wars galaxy, as the Mandalorians are working together to fend off pirate attacks. We then see Moff Gideon address the Shadow Council. Coolest name we've heard in Star Wars in a long time. There are many interesting characters there, including Brendol Hux, who is played by Brian Gleason, the brother of General Hux's Domhnall Gleason. The Shadow
Council. Kept in the family. That was really cool.
Awesome. I thought it was fantastic. Really happy to see that. If you're a Hux fan, and I am, I think that character is hysterical. The Shadow Council is in disarray as they await the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn.
I think that they're giving us, like, putting faces and names to who exactly is behind this conspiracy. So it kind of makes it clearer. I mean, we could guess. We know from the Phasma books that, you know, the Hux family was there and was part of this. We know that Snoke was being like puppeted by Palpatine, but that seemed to be like the kind of the dark side angle as opposed to like the political bureaucratic functioning behind it. So that's what we're seeing now. I like that they call themselves the Shadow Council, because there's really no debate anymore over whether or not we're the baddies. Like, they know. But that's also been like true to Star Wars since the beginning. We've had the Shadow Collective. We've had everyone like, yeah, we know we're evil. We don't care. It makes
me hope that someday the MCU will get the Masters of Evil, because it's just like the best team villain name. the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, as Magneto once called them. It's great. So then Moff Gideon convinces the council to send him aid so he can destroy the Mandalorians once and for all. Speaking of Mandalorians, the Night Owls and the remnants of the Death Watch are reunited on Navarro for a grand feast. And before the feast, Grief Karga presents Din Djarin with a rebuilt IG-11, now IG-12, a Grogu pilotable version of the old droid with the vocal functions to say yes and no. Erik, did you like this element in the episode? Because my answer is yes, 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 yes.
I need a sometimes button, a sometimes, or just like a mix of yes and no. Because, I mean, anything that you give Grogu to do, especially this little, like, Bjorn visual of him just sitting in the chest, operating it, getting to grab Melaroon fruits, I'm okay with all that stuff. I think it's so fun, and it's a delight. But it's like, did we have to do this to IG-11? They're, like, his corpse is being mutilated and desecrated. At every turn, they lobotomized him.
Yeah.
Like, why not just let him live as a statue? Jesus Christ.
Because Grogu needed a mech to pilot. And, we may still get a reversion back to the IG-11 because where did we leave off? It was just that, like, we're missing one droid piece that the Anzellan could still maybe put into IG-12 to make them IG-11. Isn't that where we left off?
According to Pelimoto, that part isn't made anymore. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry. You got to get that. They don't make that charger anymore. You got to buy the new iPhone charger.
That's such a bummer and a little too close to home. So, at the feast, Bo-Katan rallies the troops to retake Mandalore, and a small team heads to the surface of the battle-scarred planet while the remaining Mandalorians remain in orbit just above Mandalore. On the surface, they meet a surviving group of Mandalorians who never left their home world, very Mad Max. They agree to take Bo and company to the Great Forge. Axe Woves and Paz Vizsla continue a great tradition of physically fighting over a board game, but the fight is broken up by Grogu in his IG-12 suit. Again, love this moment. Thought it was fantastic. Very fitting for Grogu and his, I guess, character development.
I did like that a lot. I mean, that it seems like if the whole reason was to just be able to have Grogu physically separate these two warring Mandalorians, then I think it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
Could the child have just used the Force to repel the two? Probably. He did hold back a Mudhorn and tamed a Rancor.
Yeah.
But
that's true. You got to imagine.
Takes a lot out of them.
Those Mandos are probably smaller than those huge creatures that you just mentioned. But, Hasbro's got to sell new action figures. And I, for one, can't wait for the IG-12 with the little Grogu accessory in the chest. It's going to be great. So then the group is attacked by a giant creature, not the Mythosaur, but they manage to survive and head underground where they are once again attacked, but this time by Gideon's Mando-inspired troopers. Who the heck are all these guys? I don't like them. Boo to them.
I have questions. They are clearly, design-wise, being set up to look like the First Order stormtroopers.
Right.
I think they have like the same kind of shaped chess pieces and everything. But yeah, like from whom is he recruiting them? It sounds like there's like a faction of Imperial loyalists everywhere. There was that line among the Shadow Council where it's like, they're still eager to fight. But it's just like, man, that they were all able to do this in secret on Mandalore is just, it brings up a lot of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are how many years removed from the Purge? Like the Empire or the remnants, I guess at this point, knew that it wasn't so poisonous and toxic that they could go and build all that base out. It's very, very impressive. But like you said, there's loyalists to the Empire everywhere. It's just a bunch of Elia Kanes, basically, like in this armor, flying around. But thankfully, I think the Mandalorians are a little bit more skilled in that kind of battle. So, but they do get pinned down in a trap set by Gideon. Din is captured, and Bo and the rest of the Mandalorians are able to retreat, save for R.I.P. Paz Vizsla, who heroically sacrifices himself to buy more time for the rest of the group to escape. He takes out a dozen or so troopers before being killed by Praetorian guards, and that's what you missed on Glee. I mean, The Mandalorian, season 3.
Get out of here.
Sorry.
What a heartbreaker to end the episode. Just a smash cut to black. I mean, I know. They showed his heavy repeating blaster just heating up in his hands. He's like, he spent it all the way down to the last charge. It hurts to see this guy go down.
Listen, it's Star Wars at its best. Erik, I don't know if you have been caught up on The Bad Batch, but we had some pretty emotional finale action going on over there for The Bad Batch Season 2. And like we've been saying, a lot of the story and plot elements are really kind of tying into what they're exploring in The Mandalorian. But it was just a real 1-2 punch this past week of like The Bad Batch season finale. And now this. No, Paz Vizsla, R.I.P. It's so sad. But I've loved this sort of character development. Again, I think it's the best that Star Wars can offer, where they take a cool looking character in the background who you don't know that much about. And over time, little by little, you learn more about the character. You start to like the character. All of a sudden, you're ride or die with this character. Like, this dude is awesome. When he went to defend Din and started a speech with like basically saying, this is a bunch of bullshit, but Din saved my son's life and now I'm going to stand by him no matter what. Like, immediately endearing. So much fun. And what a great heroic sacrifice. This is the way indeed. I thought it was fantastic.
And some great physical work by Tate Fletcher. That
Absolutely.
guy brought it. He was incredible to watch.
I totally agree. I really hope that like a lot of great sci-fi television, that Tate is still a part of the show and can just play another faceless character who we haven't maybe met yet, because that physicality, that acting, that performance, that voice, it's all fantastic. So huge props to Tate.
Yeah, we saw him in the pilot episode in that bar on the ice planet, like with this face, but he could play any other character. Just do not let him, like, he has to have that waxy mustache.
Yeah.
Has to. Non-negotiable. He will not lose that mustache.
Whew.
Nor should he ever. Just a quick reminder that the best way to support New Rockstars is to grab some merch from nerdriot.shop. We have a amazing assortment of Mandalorian inspired shirts and hoodies and all this great stuff. You can get this like Grogu one. So yeah, grab all that at nerdriot.shop, and thank you for supporting us. And Hector, so let's talk a bit more about the Shadow Council and this question of, is the armorer a spy? Is he, like, to quote another famous Hux, am I the spy? You know, are they the spy? Is that kind of the inside joke here with the Hux family? Because yeah, we meet part of the Shadow Council obviously includes Moff Gideon, but we have Brendol Hux, who, as you mentioned, Brian Gleason, brother to Domhnall Gleeson. Brendol is the father to Armitage Hux, Domhnall Gleeson's character in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. And
really, it is this father and son that oversee the creation of, you know, what they call the perfect soldier in the early years of the First Order. A lot of this is covered in the Phasma book. So go back and read the Phasma book. You find out her history with these Armitages and with these Huxes, but with the Armitages and the Brendols and the Stokes and all of them. It's a very interesting read. It gives you a lot of context here. Actually, a spoiler warning for, you know, this book, or at least this is what happens in the book. We don't know how strict they're going to stick to it, but, you know, Brendol is killed by his son Armitage. Armitage takes over. He commits patricide. And that's how Armitage Hux becomes a major leader in the First Order. Now, this episode is called The Spies. And, you know, we would be remiss to if we didn't mention that wonderful moment in The Rise of Skywalker where Armitage Hux revealed himself to be a spy. But I don't think the Huxes here are the spies. It's also established that Brendol is overseeing what is called Project Necromancer, and necromancy is the occult art of resurrecting dead bodies and just, you know, fiddling with dead bodies to see what you learn. Apparently, this is the code name given to the Sith Eternals plot to clone and resurrect Palpatine. I might have been wrong, Hector, but didn't look like Moff Gideon was walking past some tanks that contained something.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, it seemed like there were more. It's kind of just interesting. They just have jars of like past experiments everywhere. Yep. They're like, okay, these didn't work out, but we'll just keep these tanks here just in case this yeast grows into something and we don't want to throw it out. You never know.
Yeah, very, very smart of them to hold on to that. You know, it could lead to some delicious bread, but it's also very like Nazi experiment of them, very Nazi eugenics, you know, to have all of these. Anytime we see like fictional Nazi storytelling, they're always performing these occult experiments, and they're always dabbling with cloning and resurrecting zombies and all this kind of stuff. So, and also I hate to correct you on your own show, Erik. I'm so sorry, but you keep saying Hux. I believe the pronunciation is Hugs. It's General Hugs. Am I wrong? I thought it was Hugs. Or maybe I'm just going off of what Poe Dameron called him at the beginning of The Last Jedi. My favorite. I'll hold for General Hugs. Can he hear me?
You know what? Do not try to hug a Gleason, as we saw in the Banshees of Inisherin. He doesn't want to hug. He will cut off his fingers the more hugs you give him.
Oh my gosh.
So I thought it was interesting how Moff Gideon called Brendol Hux obsessed with creating clones. Like, this isn't just something he's doing because some Sith occultist was like, hey, you have to do this because Palpatine. He's like, no, he's all about cloning. He loves it. So you have both like a Sith cult that is doing the cloning, and you have like a military faction who's into it as well. And Hux is even asking, he's like, so did you hear back from Dr. Pershing? Because I would love his research. Like, he's so into it. It's like his favorite thing.
Did he mention me? Did he talk about me, Dr. Pershing? Did he say anything?
Yeah.
How is he?
Oh, I love him. But we also learned that Hux already has Praetorian guards.
Sweet.
We know those red cloak badasses that protected Snoke on The Last Jedi. So happy we get to see these guys again. And now we also meet another interesting figure, Captain Gilad Pellaeon, who is played by Xander Berkeley, a character actor who has been in everything. Gregory from The Walking Dead. He played the foster dad in Terminator 2. He was like the spy Secret Service agent on Air Force One. I think one of my favorite roles of his. He's so good in that. This guy is a major figure from Legends materials. He first appeared in Heir to the Empire, Timothy Zahn's Thrawn book. He's considered Thrawn's protege. He's just a fascinating figure, and he did cameo briefly in just through his voice in an episode of Rebels, but otherwise that was it. So now we get to see him in live action. It's just that mustache, the hunched over appearance. He looks exactly as his captain would, based off of what you've read about him.
It's awesome. I've already been having this discussion with my friends over the past few years, but it keeps happening with every new episode of The Mandalorian, every new sort of announcement. But I just can't believe we're in a world where some of that old great Legends material, like the character of Grand Admiral Thrawn, is now being really embraced by the rest of Star Wars and put in not just in an animated show, but now a live action series, and is probably going to appear in a movie. And I know that there are Star Wars fans who were upset when Disney came out in 2015 and they're like, well, we have to do away with this canon because it doesn't really line up with what we're trying to do. But I'm also hugely appreciative of, first of all that stuff is like still in print. Like they just still want to get your money any way they can. So you can get those books, you can buy those books. They're at Barnes & Noble, which is crazy. But also just that everything that they've been producing since then with the expanded universe of novels and comics and video games and VR experiences, like the Lucasfilm storytelling creative side, you know, they're looking at what they're doing with publishing with the High Republic. And instead of just going, yeah, you guys can do whatever you want, we're going to make a show set in that era. We're going to use these characters and use these great moments from the comics and the novels and try to, like you keep mentioning Phasma. And I feel like they're not going to contradict any of that stuff. But if there's an opportunity, they'll embrace some of it. They'll reinforce some of it. And it's so exciting that fans of extra material and extra ways to enjoy this media, like novels, like comic books, are not missing out, but instead it's just kind of like continues to reinforce our love, because it's like you guys are in on something cool. And it's so cool, in fact, that the movies and the TV shows are going to explore that same kind of thing too. It's just so cool. So exciting.
Yeah. And it makes it likelier that at some point, either on this show or maybe in the Filoni directed movie, we might see Phasma too. Like, she was definitely around going forward at this point in history as the First Order rises. But they're all talking about Thrawn. And Gideon specifically seems doubtful that Thrawn is even alive anymore. He calls out Pellaeon on Thrawn being a nobody, a no-show in these meetings.
Yeah.
So I think that's setting up an interesting conflict between Gideon and Thrawn. We'll talk about that more later. Now, to talk about the spies of this episode, there's a lot of questions over who the spies are. And, you know, my snap reaction coming out of the episode is that the Armorer just seems really sus this episode.
Yeah.
And, you know, you were there when we reacted to episode 2, and I mentioned that the Armorer might be the big bad of the season. My prediction there wasn't so much that she would be a deceitful spy, a political tactician working with Moff Gideon, the person who's done more damage to the Mandalorians than anyone, to bring down certain parts of the Mandalorian culture, or through some other kind of like aspect of her character we don't know about. I thought her rigid, stubborn superstition and dogmatism would be what would make her kind of a villain, that it would be a war between traditionalism and progressivism within the Mandalorian tribes. So this is certainly a surprise to me. But, you know, there are certainly questions we have. So the way this episode ends with the Armorer working with these injured people to take them back up to the light cruiser, we keep cutting back to her, which is so weird. Like, didn't you feel like she was either going to just get shot?
Yeah.
Or like, at first I saw her approach, I thought the light cruiser was just going to get nuked for a second.
That's
like,
what I thought too. I mean, is there a possibility, Eric, because I want to keep living in the world where the Armorer is good, where the armor gets to keep being on the side of the Mandalorians. Even with her very extremist kind of cult-ish way of thinking, you're not wrong that that's definitely a great source of conflict, but I really like her, and I'm hoping that she's not full-on Imperial Remnant loyalist or whatever, but is there a possibility that continuing to cut back to that? Because I was thinking, oh, this is where Gideon and his crew are going to show up, and they're going to take them all out. Was that a red herring to make us think, oh, that's where they're going to show up, that's where they're going to show up, that's where they're going to show up? So then when we get to further in the cave and all of a sudden that's where the trap lies, it was just a surprise pulling out the rug out from under us of like, no, Gideon's been here the whole time on Mandalore.
He's already there.
Could that be a possibility?
Very possible. Very possible. We just have other questions like, how was he there? Like, how did Din Djarin not see this when they were at, like, we visited Mandalore twice this season when Din Djarin went there first. And then, like, were they just really quiet?
It's a planet.
Like,
It's planets are bigger than one small community underground. It's a whole planet.
Okay.
You could land in Paris and not know anything about what's going on in Los Angeles. So imagine Mandalore. There could be a whole system of caves. We have no idea what's going on.
That's completely true. Completely true. There are multiple cities, but I think it's also fair to say Star Wars does not treat planets like planets. They treat them like cities.
Right. There's like 2 cities on Tatooine, and we've been to them a lot.
The planet of Navarro is basically just a town with... No, that's not true, because we've seen other parts of Navarro. There was an Imperial base on Navarro, but it was also like a place off the map that no one ever really talked about. So I think even the people living in Navarro didn't think about what happened on the other side.
And that Imperial base was just on the outskirts of the capital city of Navarro. You're not wrong.
Well, and there was an Imperial presence there too. So Navarro's not the best example. I think, in fact, a lot of this is good arguments against the Armorer being some kind of villain, because why would she send Mando and Bo-Katan or at least Mando to the Living Waters? Because she would, in that case, she would definitely risk him stumbling upon the Imperial presence. When would she have had time to forge together some Beskar armor for Moff Gideon if she was with, Paz Vizsla and other members of the Children of the Watch all that time? Like, and it didn't seem like they had ships until Bo-Katan got there.
Listen, I just want to also recall something I just thought of right now. Going back to one of the biggest betrayals in the entire history of the Star Wars galaxy, Order 66. The clones were like good dudes, and one flip of the switch, and all of a sudden, like a programming went off in their head. And they're like, okay, we have to kill all the Jedi, the people that we've been working with, all of these generals that we respect immensely. We got to kill them all. Jedi are bad. So what if the Armorer is this deep, deep, deep undercover, like secretive agent who is basically placed here by Gideon years ago with the caveat of like, no, just be a Mandalorian, be strong in your beliefs. We are going to give you a vague background so people understand where you could kind of, infiltrate and be part of the group. But just continue to be your true, authentic self until I'm going to need to flip the switch, say the code word, Winter Soldier you, and all of a sudden, Homecoming, some of those other code words. And then she kind of goes into like, okay, now I have to put all the Mandalorians in one place so that they can all get taken out. And I have to, listen to my programming.
Yeah, doesn't that sound like a little surprising with the fact that like the Mandalorians were already beaten? Why would he need to set up anything in a group of people that they already completely wiped out after the Night of 1,000 Tears and the Purge? Like, even the other members of the Shadow Council were like, Mandalorians, they're still a thing? I guess we just have questions of how they were set up. Like, a lot of people are suggesting maybe Axe Woves is the spy. But like, if you were to go back and look at all of his decisions, it doesn't really make sense for him to be a spy either. I think the issue is that we're looking at this as if it's a show like Andor, and it's not. Right. It's a show like The Mandalorian and Clone Wars. Yep,
it's for kids. It can't be complex enough, complicated enough that kids are going to sort of like lose the thread. It's got to be, there's going to be twists and turns, but it's going to be things that like, if you sit down and really think about it, you're probably going to be able to figure it out, because 8-year-olds have to be able to be like, oh, whoa, cool, and understand and follow sort of what's happening. I also want to point out too, could this title episode refer to Elia Kane, who really was in this episode confirmed in what we've been suspecting for many, many episodes in this whole season, but she was revealed to be the spy working for Gideon. Could that be what the...
But didn't we already know that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm pressing you, Hector. I just think like It's so weird to call this episode The Spies.
Plural.
Yeah, spies. Is it because the Shadow Council are not spies? They're all clearly evil. They're not playing any other kind of role.
Right.
It's like suggesting that there's someone within the Mandalorian ranks that are spies.
Yeah.
Are those pirates that they ran across spies? I don't think so. I do have questions about how they were able to survive, but they also seem to be like that rugged survivalists.
Yeah, Mad Max. Very Mad Max. Listen, all signs point to the armorer, but I just don't like it, Erik. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just don't like it.
I'm with you, Hector. It just brings up too many questions of like the armorer's arc over these 3 seasons that if she were a spy the whole time, it's like, well, then why did you hang out in a cave that long? When did you get away? What are you trying to gain from this? And I think that there's nothing to gain for a Mandalorian who were basically close to extinction for being a spy. The only thing that I could see, I guess there's a question of timeline.
Yeah.
Like we look at these events throughout season 3 as having happened within like, a couple months. But if they took place over like a year, if like what changes when Bo-Katan got back from the living waters and said that there's a mythosaur under there, that could have been where things changed. And then like communication was sent to Moff Gideon, like, hey, this is actually a valuable place to be. Maybe now you can set up your base there. But I just don't know when or how the armor could have done that.
And it's also, maybe the scene in this episode where Bo-Katan actually explains the deal that she made with Gideon in an effort to protect and spare her people. Maybe that's a little bit of foreshadowing, and maybe the armor has a similar deal set up that we're not privy to yet. That we, in the next episode, if it is the armor, I'm sure we're going to get the sort of like explanation, the villain speech, Gideon probably talking to Din Djarin with the classic, we're not so different, you and I, and some sort of a revelation that like the deal set up with the armorer, the spy, is that when she brings all of the Mandalorians together, her specific covert will be spared. They will be able to continue to live their life and their way of thinking, whereas Bo-Katan and all the rest of the forces. But of course, Gideon is lying to her. You know what I mean? We might get one of those classic switcheroos where Gideon's like, oh, yeah, sure. I told you that your covert would get what was owed to them. And what was owed to them was death. And then he's going to betray the armor. And then the armor will be like, oh no, why did I trust this Imperial remnant? And now I've decided to turn it back on him. And maybe I'll sacrifice myself in an effort to redeem myself. And it'll be that kind of classic story. But there may be just a deal in place with the armor that we're not aware of. And that might be because she is so loyal to her covert that she was willing to play the card of, no, Bo-Katan, you are accepted. We embrace you. You can take off your helmet. You walk both worlds. Meanwhile, on the inside, she's stewing. She hates taking off your helmet, but she's like, I'll play this role until I can position you and your group in the Night Owls, and then you get killed off by Moff Gideon. So maybe the next episode, maybe Ahsoka, maybe the next season of The Mandalorian might reveal things that we don't know yet, but fingers crossed that the armor can still be good. I like Emily Swallow. I like her very much.
I do too. And for anyone who's like, it would be impossible for the armorer to be the villain, I'm not saying I want the armorer to be the villain this way. In fact, I think I'm going to be a little confused. Still, I'm going to have a lot of questions. I'm just saying we've covered these Disney Plus shows for a long time. And if you assume they all have airtight logic with their character motivations and their reveals, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, my friend. They've done some crazy shit before on these shows that do not make sense. I mean, Sharon Broker being the power broker, or Sharon Carter being the power broker, doesn't really make a lot of sense, but they did it. Like they do this all the time, and then they just have
until
like a couple
Secret
lines.
Invasion, when she gets revealed, when she gets revealed to be a Skrull, Erik. That's all.
Yeah, I think I've just learned by being burned in the past, you can't have like ultimate high expectations for all of these shows. I think you can kind of see the writing on the wall with them. With a show like Andor, you know that like they put a lot of thought specifically into character motivations, that every character feels like the protagonist of the story, and everything they do is pretty clear according to their character's logic. And based off of decisions they've made in the past. On these shows, it's really just like looked at more of as a top-down sort of thing. Where does this character need to be with this character to set up this spinoff and to sell toys?
And I love those toys, so I'm along for the ride.
And I will buy all of those toys, and I will watch all those spinoffs. I don't care. Jeez. But I want to ask you, Hector, about this brewing conflict between Thrawn and Gideon. Do you think the season ends with Thrawn killing Gideon?
Oh, I thought about that while watching the episode, and I ultimately came back to Giancarlo Esposito is too good of a draw to not want to put him in a theatrical New Republic experience. Now, will Grand Admiral Thrawn kill Moff Gideon in that movie to show audiences like, no, Thrawn's like a real threat. He just killed Gus from Breaking Bad. Like, this guy's a big deal. Yes, I think that might happen there, but I don't think we're going to lose Giancarlo at the end of this season. I don't think we would lose Giancarlo during the Ahsoka show. I don't think we're going to lose Giancarlo in The Mandalorian Season 4. But I think that in the sort of Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, Avengers Endgame finale that they're building to, I think that's the kind of thing that you can wait for that. It's almost like I don't know. It's almost like a Vader versus Palpatine kind of a thing. And I think that for general audiences who might not know, especially movie audiences who might not have seen every episode of Disney Plus TV shows or have watched Rebels or even read any of the Thrawn novels, whether new canon or Legends, that kind of thing is a great movie moment that really gets audiences to, oh, snap, this Grand Admiral Thrawn, he's a big deal. So that's my prediction. I don't think we're going to lose Giancarlo, but I do think exactly what you said will happen later.
Nice. Any other final predictions headed into the finale, Hector?
Yes, we're all going to recoup at Plazier 15. We're going to recruit Jack Black, Lizzo. They're going to come in guns a-blazing to save Din Djarin, and it's going to be epic.
Yeah, I'm trying to lock in. I think we will see Thrawn in a post-credit scene.
I agree.
Would be my guess. I don't think he's going to factor into the episode, but I think just structurally makes most sense to show that beautiful Lars Mikkelsen face in a post-credit scene. I think it's going to set up an interesting period of time where I don't know if Thrawn's going to be serving the agenda of the First Order, and I kind of like that. I want Thrawn to be more of a rogue.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to suggest that he is breaking away from the First Order, and I think that's the best move for Star Wars as well. I think you can totally have part of the timeline continue on. You have the Hux father and son operation that are working with people like Gideon and the rest of the member of the Shadow Council to work with the Sith Eternal and Snoke and recruit using, making Beskar armor. I guess at some point in the future they are going to lose their Beskar source because, Finn wasn't wearing Beskar when we find him in the First Order. Yeah, I think that's still going to continue. I want Thrawn to just be a rogue. I want him to be a rogue, and I think and he
all
should
of
have
that,
more of a personal gripe with everyone. I
agree fully, and I think none of that is really going to conflict with how the First Order is the big bad of the sequel trilogy. This 9 or so years after the Battle of Yavin time period that we're in right now with The Mandalorian, this is the prime time, just like the original Thrawn appearance in that Legends novel, for Thrawn to sort of rise up before the 30 years later rise of the First Order. And another great moment too in this episode is when they were talking about allocating all these resources, and one of these members of the Shadow Council I think it was Hux, wasn't sharing their fleet or whatever they're amassing with the rest of the group. And I'm like, yeah, there's the explanation for the Final Order and Exegol having 1,000 Star Destroyers. I'm like, you got to start somewhere. And they're already building that up so that we can get that big reveal in episode 9. So, yeah.
It's you could have spared one of these super Star Destroyers at some point. No. We needed to bury them all under the ice of Exegol so it looks really cool when they rise. Yeah. So I think we'll be in an interesting place with the Mandalorian people, right? I think it just makes me sad to see that Mandalore is just kind of this wasteland and that it's been now co-opted by Moff Gideon's people right under their noses, because it's okay, well, great. They're never really going to have their homeland again, and they need to let go of that. I think they seem to have something great going on Navarro, some nice hot springs. They had some camps, roasting some kadus on bonfires. That seems like a happy life. Just live there forever. You do not need to reclaim your homeland at that point. I'm sorry. It sucks. It's cursed.
We've said it before. We'll say it again. Mandalore isn't a place. It's a people. Thank you, Thor.
That's
Ragnarok.
Right.
That's correct.
I hope that someone says that or learns that next week. That's all I hope for.
Maybe it'll be IG-12 himself through the voice of Taika Waititi, director of Thor Ragnarok.
Using yes and no as binary code to communicate it. Yes. No. Yes. Anyway, well, we'll leave it there for this episode of Wookieeleaks. I know people are going to get mad at me for being too hard on this episode. We're just trying to figure it out, because overall, I think Rick Famuyiwa doing a great job shooting all this. The action was incredible. I mean, the performances were fun as always. I liked the adventure overall. I just have questions overall about the series, and you know, if this episode adds more questions to that list, I'm gonna still be trying to work through them here on Wednesday mornings. But hey, my Easter egg breakdown is gonna be coming tomorrow, as always. You can follow me at Voss. Follow Hector at Hector is Funny. Tommy will be back next week, and we'll be back next week to react to the season finale. It's gonna be an interesting one. But you can also check out the stuff I got going over on the deep dive. We got an investigation episode coming out on Friday that's gonna look into the history of post-credit scenes. Speaking of post-credit scenes, I think you'll really enjoy that one. You can follow New Rockstars, subscribe to Wookieeleaks wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for watching, and we have spoken.